Flock cameras have been on public streets for years, but have suddenly become a flashpoint. Communities are seeing protests and residents are demanding restrictions. And there are a couple of bills in the works at the federal and state levels to regulate flock cameras and other automatic license plate readers. But privacy advocates say it's about time. The American Civil Liberties Union has been working against what it calls creepy cameras and has launched a Get the Flock Out campaign to shut them down. Gary Daniels is the legislative director for the ACLU of Ohio.
This is the type of thing that privacy advocates, we've all been asking ourselves the same question. We've been talking about these issues of government surveillance and how quickly and rapidly the technology has developed and what the ramifications are. Quite literally for 20 years we've been talking about this, and so now it has obviously entered the public consciousness. I'm not exactly sure why, but it just seems like we've reached a peak here where people have finally caught on as to the capabilities of this type of technology and what that means, and the lack of controls over it. So I'm not precisely sure why it has now captured the public's imagination, but we are all very happy that it has.
What specifically are you worried about that can happen or can be done through these flock cameras?
Well, with this type of technology, and it includes these types of cameras and similar types of technologies, but with regard to automatic license plate readers, we worry about, without any controls or anything of that nature, that this can be used for the purposes of mass surveillance of all of us, no matter where we go or what we do. Automatic license plate readers can be set up and are set up so that, for instance, what kind of health care are you receiving, physical and mental? What kind of meetings, political protests, rallies are you going to? Where do you worship? Do you go to the gun store, to the gun range, to the gun show? Any of these types of things where people quite understandably are like, you know, I would rather the government not follow me around while I am doing this. And that's a perfectly natural and rational reaction for people to have. But here in Ohio, it's the Wild West. We have no statewide laws or almost no statewide laws governing the use of this type of technology, and almost nothing at the local level. At the ACLU of Ohio, we would like to see this technology eliminated, not used by the government whatsoever. But we understand people aren't quite there. So our goal now, if that is the situation, is to have these things regulated in such a way as to make mass surveillance as impossible as possible.
And you do have some Republican state lawmakers on your side proposing legislation to regulate them. Senator Al Catrona planning a bill that would ban local and state governments and law enforcement from sharing data with a third party, and the data can only be saved in the system for up to 10 days before being automatically deleted, and third parties can't solicit that data as well. Is that enough for you?
Yeah, we haven't seen any of the specific wording on these proposals yet. The concern is, I think, number one, these days, what you really need with any kind of operation of automatic license plate readers is a warrant requirement. The United States Supreme Court now, over the last 15 years or so, have had 3 cases with surveillance technology come before them. GPS devices, cell phone location information, and geo-tracking, which is essentially a different form of cell phone location tracking. Each and every time in those cases, 3 for 3, the Supreme Court has said, get a warrant if you want to be able to do this. These are searches for the purpose of the Fourth Amendment. Get a warrant. And then they also, while they weren't addressing specifically automatic license plate readers, they do make broad pronouncements in those rulings about people's expectation of privacy and how far this technology has come and why this is different than those Fourth Amendment cases of the past. So I think anybody proposing any type of regulations or restrictions now, it must start with a warrant requirement. We can talk about all these other types of things and should, but there should be a warrant requirement first and foremost.
City of Columbus held a hearing on flock cameras, and you were among those who testified with your concerns. And you said there is simply no amount of regulation or restrictions that will get us comfortable with their use with their existence and use as a mass surveillance tool, whether in Columbus or anywhere else in Ohio. So it sounds like you'd like them to not exist.
That's absolutely right. We're just, surveillance technology, it always gets better. It always gets more widespread, and it always gets cheaper. It always rolls out. I can remember about 20 years ago, my very first media call on automatic license plate readers. It was said they are being used only at a few highway exits and only for the purposes of stolen cars. Well, what do you think about about that. And we said, well, it's not going to end there. It's going to go much farther. And so over the course of 20 years, particularly these last several years, we've seen them, used widespread for all kinds of purposes, and purposes we don't even know about across Ohio and across the country. So, given our own experiences and what we've witnessed with government and law enforcement and surveillance and everything else, we just can't be comfortable with this type of technology. But again, some people are not there, they're not there yet, and so hopefully we can have some good restrictions on who the data gets shared with, how long it gets kept for, which is key to preventing abuse. New Hampshire passed a law that says you can hold on to this data for 3 minutes. A lot of other people, they're arguing over a month versus 2 months, those types of things. New Hampshire passed something, 3 minutes, you get to decide what to do with it. If it's part of an investigation, you can hold on to it. If it meets this certain criteria, get rid of all the rest. And so we would like to see something very similar here in Ohio.
And like you mentioned, you've been talking about this for a while, and there's been all sorts of technology that has been used to solve crimes, to try to figure out what's going on in certain areas. I mean, facial recognition technology, for instance. And all this stuff has been happening, but the sky hasn't fallen down. The argument could be that, are you overly concerned about this? And are you thinking about something that will never happen?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one thing to keep in mind is that automatic license plate readers are only one spoke of the wheel. So, we're talking about automatic license plate readers. We're talking about drones. We're talking about facial recognition. We're talking about cell phone location tracking information. All of these things that can be used and are used by law enforcement in a variety of ways. And when people, we know this, when people are being watched or they fear they're being watched, they change their behavior. So there are places they will not go. There are activities they will not engage in. There are people they will not hang out with because they have the government watching them. And some people say, well, if you don't have anything to hide, then what's the big deal? Look, we should never be in a position as a society where the people are the ones arguing to the government why they want their rights maintained. That burden is on the government. If they want to violate our rights, if they want to violate our privacy, if they want to surveil us 24/7, 365, the burden is on them to explain why they need to do that, not on us as to why they shouldn't be or must not be doing that.
And those people who are supporting the use of flock cameras say that they help solve crimes, they track missing persons and stolen cars. And are you thinking that there's another way to do that without using these automatic license plate readers? And it should be said, flock is just one of several that are out there.
That's right. This is not just a flock problem. There are other corporations out there doing the same thing. Flock, they're the big guys on the block right now, so they are quite understandably the target here. But it should be no surprise to people, and I don't want to sound too flippant about this, but it should be no surprise to people that if we surveil you around the clock, you know what, we're going to solve more crimes. It's sort of like, an argument to say, well, if we went around and confiscated all the firearms from every household in Columbus, Ohio, there would probably be less shooting crimes and shooting deaths and everything. Well, of course they would, but we say, look, we have to strike a balance here. Okay, if you're not doing anything wrong with the firearms under the Second Amendment, you know what, you can still have them. So we need to strike a balance here. And so there are some times and some uses for automatic license plate readers where I think everybody's like, hey, we've got no problem with that. But the number one problem here in Ohio is no laws governing their use. We have a helpful law that says under Ohio's public records laws that the surveillance data, who they're following, the license plates, where they're going and everything, that is not available under Ohio's public records laws. And that is a good thing for the sake of personal privacy. But all these other questions, who does the data get shared with, for how long, when can these devices be deployed versus specifically when they cannot be deployed, all of that is left to the local governments to figure out, and they have dropped the ball as well because there's almost nothing at the local level across Ohio as well. I can't think of anything with these types of ramifications, this type of policy area where our elected officials and politicians have just sort of thrown up their hands and said, hey, whatever. But right now, that is the state of affairs with surveillance technology and automatic license plate readers here in Ohio.
Did you have the same concerns about red light and speed cameras?
Yes, rather quaint these days. When red light cameras rolled out, we said, these are tools that can be used to surveil people. They're meant to surveil people. They bring up obvious privacy implications, but that has been surpassed by numerous types of technologies, much more invasive over the years. And for that matter, I don't know what it will be 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 6 months from now. We're going to be talking about automatic license plate readers concerns is rather quaint because there's new technology out there that has been developed, that's being shopped around, that is much more invasive even than automatic license plate readers to follow people around, to track essentially the digital signals that come off of the car and their phone and their credit card and everything else. And so, there's a thirst out there by private corporations to sell the rest of us, our governments, our law enforcement, the citizens, that you just must keep increasing surveillance against people, and we're going to give you the tools to do it. And again, we're at that point now where I think Ohioans and everybody else has said, enough is enough. You can't keep doing this and keep us at least in the dark about what's going on.
But if you have a cell phone or a smartphone, you are being potentially surveilled at any point when you're walking around with that. So what's the difference?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that type of issue is what's come up in the courts in this respect, because there's when it comes to expectation of privacy, there's these discussions, and the other side will say in court, well, you've got no interest in it because you're out there. It's sort of like DNA. It's like right now I'm leaving my DNA here. I have no expectation of privacy if someone wants to come along and use it for some other purposes, law enforcement purposes. So the court's taken a look at this and said, well, look, it's not exactly voluntary. I mean, people use smartphones. Almost everybody out there, not everybody, but almost everybody out there uses smartphones as part of their daily life, as part of their work life. It is necessary for them to give up certain information about their location, about themselves, for their contract, for the service to work and everything. And so this idea that we're voluntarily giving up this information so that anybody, including government, can access it, the court might have bought that in the past, but it's not doing it at this point.
And Ohio does have a new law on drones, and you've been concerned about that for, I think, largely some of the same reasons here. It requires police to get that search warrant that you were talking about to observe the interior of private spaces like homes or businesses, and most flight data and surveillance footage are classified as public records. There are exceptions. You had argued, the ACLU had argued, that those exceptions and what was in the law weren't enough, that you were concerned about your privacy, basically.
Right. When it comes to drone regulation, we wanted to see something much different with House Bill 251. Again, going back to some of the arguments on the government side they will make, is you have no expectation of privacy once you step outside of your home. Anybody can see you doing anything you want, so what's the problem if law enforcement can do it as well? So that's the argument made in courts. House Bill 251 takes that argument and explicitly puts into state law, hey, we know we're regulating drones here, we know we have somewhat of a warrant requirement under some circumstances, but also in the plain letter of House Bill 251 it says, but if you're outside where anybody can see you, all bets are off. And it's exactly what we're not looking for in a drone regulation bill. Plus, unlike our automatic license plate reader law, it says that the footage, the data that's obtained by drones is available via public records. So you can imagine, worst case scenario, what this might mean for stalkers, what it might mean even for commercial businesses, private entities now that have access to all of this data and what they might use it for. So there are some good things in House Bill 251, but there's an awful lot of awful things too. And the most frustrating thing about it is it passed through the House and the Senate with almost no opposition, a handful of no votes, bipartisan, but only a few on each side. Otherwise, everybody took it and ran with it.
Is the right to privacy in danger? I mean, is there a right to privacy anymore, or are we seeing the right to privacy slowly being chipped away with court decisions and things like this?
I think at this point we don't have privacy. I think what privacy advocates and other people are trying to do is trying to claw some of that back. Because over the years people would talk about, and it would appear at forums and in testifying, and people would say, are you afraid we might lose that right to privacy? Are you afraid about the future of privacy? It's like, look people, that ship has sailed. That ship has sailed years ago. So what we're trying to do now is claw it back. These types of technologies emerged so relatively rapidly, and they improved so rapidly that it has become, understandably, very difficult, including for privacy advocates, to wrap their heads around what exactly is going on and how invasive these types of technologies are. And once we get familiar with one type of technology, guess what? There's like 3 more. And that's been the history over the past decades of surveillance technology public policy, and the courts struggling with exactly how to handle all of this.
And a lot of these rights are all kind of tied together. You mentioned the Second Amendment, which I think the ACLU gets a lot of criticism for not being as vocal on Second Amendment rights as they are on other things. But you're talking about right to reproductive freedom, which in Ohio, reproductive rights is in the Constitution. These rights are all kind of tied together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one, sort of nice thing about government surveillance and this type of surveillance technology is that there's something there for everybody. It crosses party lines, it crosses ideological lines. There's plenty of reason, at least on the civil liberties end, we think, for people to be, at a minimum, skeptical of government. And so it doesn't matter, you might be Muslim concerned that they're following you to the mosque. You might be the gun owner going to the gun show and you don't want that camera there viewing everybody coming in, coming out, keeping that data potentially forever and using it for who knows what. Understandably, this is something that crosses party and ideological lines, and that's where it becomes a real struggle for our elected officials, is they can't say, oh, it's just the Democrats, oh, it's just the Republicans, oh, it's just the left, oh, it's just the right. Everybody is concerned about this. It's very similar to the conversations and the debate we're having about data centers right now, is that everybody's mad.
And the Second Amendment is a concern for the ACLU.
Yeah, it's for people who, again, it's the gun show, the gun store, any of those types of things.
So you're on the side of people who support the Second Amendment.
Absolutely. So it's doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're leaving people alone, if you're not breaking the law or whatever, then you should have that right to privacy. So it doesn't matter if you're going out there for a Black Lives Matter protest or you're attending a Trump rally. Those automatic license plate readers shouldn't be there surveilling you as you go there or back, or where they have them in the parking lot or what have you. That's just not something, as a quote-unquote free society, we should be doing or we should be tolerating.
There are estimated to be at least 6,500 flock cameras in Ohio. Several communities have put or are considering restrictions or bans on their use and on the data they share. A recent audit in Columbus found its flock network had been searched more than 15,000 times for potentially immigration-related purposes.